Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with Kenny Cepeda and Andy Lipson. Today we will be reacting to an article from the New York Times titled "The Same Goal, Different Playbook: Why Russia Would Support Trump and Sanders." And we're going to give our take on it. It is going to be on the subject of interference, so-called interference from abroad and
Russia.
Yeah, and we will give our take on it. So let's see how we will perform for this video.
Yeah, and I'm wearing my glasses for this episode because I'm going to be reading.
Yeah.
So what we're going to try to do is read the article and give you our take on it. This is what I've heard is that this article by David Sanger in the New York Times is sort of the kind of patient zero of the whole, all this stuff getting out about Trump or Russia supporting Trump for the 2020 elections and Russia supporting Bernie Sanders for the Democratic primary. And so I kind of talked to both Kenny and Eduardo about kind of titling this episode, you know, who's meddling in U.S. elections kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So we'll get started?
Yeah, let's try.
Okay. So this is David Sanger. At first glance, it may seem contradictory that the nation's intelligence agencies were telling Congress that President Vladimir V. Putin is presumably striving to get President Trump reelected, while also warning Senator Bernie Sanders of evidence that he is the Russian president's favorite Democrat. But to the intelligence analysts and outside experts who have spent their past 3 years dissecting Russian motives in the 2016 election and who tried to limit the effort of Moscow's meddling in the 2018 midterms, what is unfolding in 2020 makes perfect sense. Mr. Trump and Mr. Sanders represent the most divergent ends of their respective parties, and both are backed by supporters known more for their passion than their policy rigor, which makes them ripe for exploitation by Russian trolls, disinformation specialists, and hackers for hire seeking to widen divisions in American society. And I put a little stop there.
I mean, for me, it sets up that, you know, Russia's meddling, it's a fact. You know, it happened, and, you know, it's, even though, you know, there are a lot of questions, and so that's the first glaring assumption here. And I mean, I agree with you know, yes, to the degree that, you know, Trump and Bernie somewhat have garnered the opposite ends of a polarized society. Mm-hmm. I definitely agree to that. I do have a question about the whole manipulation of people, you know, and that we are just, you know, victims without the ability to think in rational, you know, rationale. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what I see. It's already setting you up for, again, with those big assumptions.
Are you saying that we are not the victims?
So that thing we're gonna maybe discuss that, whether, you know, how much manipulation really plays into this, because I have big questions, you know, about foreign manipulation, and it's not new. I mean, there's always meddling, you know, of. But obviously, it got a lot of play in the last elections because the Democrats lost the election, and suddenly, you know, but they're dismissing a bunch of things, like, you know, the anger of working people that are struggling, and that yes, these two guys, well, Trump garnered that energy, and yes, you know, he's similar to Democrats. He's selling lies. You know, he doesn't have that his base interest in mind, but yet he's playing, you know, with them. If there is manipulation, you know, it's not from the Russians, it's from, you know, that party. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what I would say. And same with the Democrats, you know, with Bernie Sanders on this time, you know, because I think we might get into that, because I don't consider Sanders socialism. Mm-hmm. I think you know, he is leading us to a dead end, and actually something even more risky, you know, further pushing more people to the right. You know, once he gets to power, say he wins, and he fails to deliver because he's attached to a system, capitalism. And it's been proven around the world, and this, again, let's not be, and not in past history, in very recent history. We have Brazil, we have a lot of parts of Europe, we have, I argue, Nicaragua. Mexico might have some of that coming up because of, AMLO. And so it's all these leftists that sell, change, but because, again, they're attached to a capitalist system that fails, they will fail, they will be seen as the culprits. And so I think if Bernie wins and then fails, Trump is not the worst that we've seen. That's my thought. But I think we'll get into that later.
I wanted to just clarify what Kenny had said, because when he said that if we were falling victims, I understand where he's coming from. I do think there was an element of manipulation from abroad, and I think there's an element of it. I'm not going to say that there's a high element of it, but it's not, and I agree with you that it's not the first time. I think it has happened in the past before, except this time in 2016 it has been the most scrutinized and the most weaponized for political motives to highlight interference. But interference has always happened, even interference in other elections. But interference, I agree with it. Interference has happened in the past. It's not the first time.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that 99.999% of the election meddling is being done by characters like this. The intelligence apparatus, the CIA, the New York Times, the Democratic National Convention, Facebook, corporations, Blomberg, the rich. They are the ones meddling and messing with our elections and making them undemocratic. They're not democratic in the first place, but they're giving away that veneer. So the issue here is not the 0.0000, in my case, 1% of the meddling being done by Russia, but what they're trying to do is hide the fact, and in fact they're doing meddling right here. This is the intelligence community meddling in our election by trying to say Russia's been doing this. Because Russia is look at what they say when they talk about the divergent ends of the respective parties. We're talking about the populist left and the populist right, which is intensely angry about the loss of healthcare, intensely angry about the state getting rich, about the banks being bailed out, about the government being too strong in relationship to people's own lives. That anger exists, and these people are saying Russian trolls are producing that.
Yeah.
And so they are intervening to obscure from us the actual real anger that is driving this election. And like Kenny's saying, unfortunately, it's not leading to anything on the right. It's led to Trump on the right. It's not going to lead to anything good on the left, Bernie. But the actual anger that's there, that populist anger, is real, is something I would want the left to tap into. And these people are trying to literally intervene against us to make it seem like these people are what? The people who don't have policy rigor.
Yeah.
Right? That the policy rigor is who? Blomberg? Biden? What's her name?
Klobuchar.
Klobuchar? Or even Trump? I mean, or not Trump. Trump's not in that. But Ted Cruz? Policy rigor? Like, these people are just puppets for the deep state. And that's the thing. So these are the people intervening in our election. The people who are behind the people writing for the New York Times. And this guy, David Sanger, is essentially a CIA stooge. Because the CIA has a long history of telling lies and trying to fool us into what's going on.
Well, and my response to that is that I agree that the intelligence apparatus, the intelligence community, and even the intelligence committee in the House of Representatives are scheming, right, for political motives.
Yes.
But I would be careful to say, when you say the New York Times, I have a question.
This is New York Times.
I'm
right
not
here.
done. Are you saying the media is meddling?
Yes.
Or are you saying the New York Times supporting allegations like these?
This is direct.
Because the media, I think, even in a socialist society, would have to exist.
And
the media would always be giving their opinion and their also critiques about the current leadership.
Yes.
So I think that to say the media is meddling in elections then everything is meddling with
No,
elections. So
mainstream media is when I say meddling, I mean that they know that there's a truth that they are obscuring.
Okay.
That's what they're doing. They are attempting to
So
obscure.
you're saying the New York Times is propping this propaganda that
This is the example here.
All right.
I'm saying all of mainstream media. New York Times is just our best example. CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS.
I have a
Fox News.
Yes,
Fox
I
News,
agree
all
that,
of them.
I agree that largely.
This just happens to be
Yeah.
the New York Times happened to be the ones who were first at the jump
Yeah.
for getting this, because once this article came out, then it was all the weekend news was people talking about Russia this, then that dude who was the dude who was for Clinton, his press agent came out and said that Bernie was a Putin agent, and everyone started saying the same shit.
Yeah.
You know, and that Bernie's win in Nevada was the best thing, that Putin's best news.
Yeah.
So what is that? That's not people just coming up with, what do I think about this? They are taking their talking points from the CIA, and the CIA is operating at the level of the state here and throughout, and this is their intervention into our elections. They are trying to shape our minds here with not news, but fake news,
Yeah.
Because
lies.
So I agree that the New York Times has a history of that.
I didn't say New York Times,
The
all of
mainstream media is in cahoots. Yes.
Yes.
I agree. I was just trying to clarify if you thought the media in general, just the media.
Yes.
I would not. You said it was the mainstream media. Now you.
Well, I mean, because
Because there would be media under socialist society as
Yeah.
well. So I would not just state it a general and say that the media
And you would
right. I mean,
and-
is that? I just want you to clarify this, Andy.
I'm
Would
saying
you-
mainstream media. When you say media, I just think mainstream media. If you're talking about independent media, then no. But
I think it's
there's no-
important to be clear.
Maybe.
See, you're touching, on the socialist side, and that's maybe a conversation for a different day. But
I'm just
I-
talking
no,
about
you're right,
the
you're
media
right,
in
you're
general.
right. But
no?
but in general, do we have any mechanisms to hold them accountable? In a socialist world, you technically you would, right? But in this system we don't, and we're supposed to take their narrative, from the deep state, from the official channels at face value, and that's what the people like him are doing. In this
And I
article.
agree, and I'm in agreement with you both about
No, yeah.
that. I'm simply stating that I sometimes we have to distinguish whether it's because there's always going to be news sources in any society, even in a socialist society. Do we want to abolish those institutions?
No.
So
Where does that come from?
that's why
We're exposing its bias.
We're exposing the New York Times
As meddling in the elections. Did I
Yes,
say shut
yes,
them down?
yes.
We can get to that later. I just said they're meddling in our elections.
Yes, I just
and
wanted
I'm
to
saying
clarify.
that no, but you're not clarifying. You're obscuring because
I'm
what
not
you said was that you thought Russia was playing a role in it. And I'm telling you, they're not playing a role in it. These are the people
I
playing a role in
didn't
it.
say specific. I said abroad. I said it could have. You have so many places. There are so many troll farms out there, and I'm sure there are troll farms here that are meddling in other people's
That have
elections.
zero to do with the populist anger driving that is behind Bernie Sanders and Trump. Zero.
Yes, the populist anger. Yes, I agree. But has an element in meddling. Yes, troll farms exist to meddle in elections. Yes.
okay.
I mean, don't you? You don't think so?
But they don't do any. There's troll farms to do all sorts, make money, do all sorts of things.
Right.
But no, I don't think they're worth.
But you don't
reporting on.
acknowledge them. I think my issue is that you don't acknowledge that there are troll farms here, there, everywhere, meddling in everyone's elections. So I think that you even just acknowledging it, don't be too dismissive about it, because it exists. Whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's Korea, whoever it is, there are troll farms here, there. We're all meddling. So I'm just trying to make sure that you don't dismiss that element.
I am, because they are.
You said 100%. Now
Yes.
the populist anger, I agree, it exists. But I'm just also trying to make sure that we don't dismiss that we live in an age where now the internet is used as a weapon to meddle everywhere.
By Facebook and Google, exactly.
Yes.
Not by the independent sides.
I did not say
That's right.
Russia.
I agree.
I said it could have been, and here. I said there, everywhere. Did I not say that? So if it includes Facebook here, I agree. Facebook is also culprit in that. So I'm just saying there are troll farms here, there are troll farms abroad, and you have to acknowledge them that they exist. I did not single out Russia.
I do think, to your point, that this is an element that it's added.
What are you laughing about, Andy?
It's just, again, I got
Tell me, what is your issue?
Because I find it laughable
What?
that these people who are putting. Did you just hear?
They're
the
singling
article?
out Russia.
No, not just.
This is a complete.
singling
I
out
can
Russia.
see they have an agenda here.
But what? Right. But
There's
what?
a political agenda that's clear.
But look at the first thing they said: exploitation by Russian trolls, disinformation specialists, and hackers.
This is so clear.
Okay,
They're singling out. Who?
And that thing has zero. That has zero to do. Literally zero to do. If you pile up all the things that are being done to fuck with elections and mess with people's heads, that has zero to do with it. So then to ask me then, well, you have to admit they exist. I'm like, I don't care if they exist because they have nothing to do with what's shaping the political landscape in the United States right now. What's shaping it is partly the anger and part response to the gap between the rich and poor,
And
the immense
anger
racism.
is also being the anger is also being heightened and exploited with other meddling devices.
And I reject the notion that it's actually being heightened. I actually think it doesn't even begin to get to the level of anger that's actually in there, that actually Bernie and Trump are trying to tap down just by keeping it through the electoral wing. That anger is far larger than any troll farm can then make it explode. Those things are actually being tapped down by Trump and Bernie Sanders. They are simultaneously being attacked and even denied their existence by the center, the political center, which is the major manipulator of our election. So you don't understand. I'm saying these troll farms figure zero in it because the actual anger, the actual anger that's out there is only begin to be tapped at by the red wave of strikes that took place in this country about a year and a half ago. That's just the top of the thing. And those troll farms had nothing to do with that strike wave. Zero to do with that strike wave. So that's why troll farms may exist, but it doesn't even matter. They have nothing to do with it except it is part of the mainstream media and the establishment trying to shape the way that we are being fooled into believing into extreme views.
When you say they have nothing to do with it, what do you mean by that? It's very vague what you mean.
So what I think I understand is what Lipson is saying is that the circumstantial things that people know, their own facts, their own lives, their struggles, that has nothing to do with
any of that.
No, okay. Then.
But what I'm saying is that there are troll farms that are exploiting also some of that anger.
And that's what I hear you saying.
And they have been organizing abroad and using people here. And you both have to acknowledge that it has happened. There's evidence of it. There is evidence of it. Well, you have maybe not heard about it, or maybe you didn't.
I have heard. Mueller talked all about it, but go ahead.
I'm not talking about Mueller.
Okay, so I think I am somewhat of a centrist right now.
Yes.
Because I do hear what Lipson is saying, that, this anger is not, created by
I did
pros.
not say that.
But, and I hear what you're saying, that this is a new player that intensifies the level of manipulation and targeted manipulation. Yeah. I still have questions about that because I do believe in people's ability to rationalize their own circumstances. And, if there is manipulation, the one that you should be concerned is about these people like him on this article. People like that are...
I am concerned, but I also want to acknowledge there's another side. And sometimes in this conversation, at least, Andy, the way you said is zero.
Yes.
And when you said zero, I'm like, whoa, you don't even acknowledge that there might be some percentage in there that has an element.
I'm saying it's zero. I'm saying that troll farms that they claim are somehow manipulating people into getting anger and divisive factor zero into it. Do you know where the divisiveness comes, at least from the left, with regards to segmenting people into genders and races? It's the divisiveness of the actual racism that exists under capitalism, plus the political bankruptcy of identity politics, which is being forced down our throats by the Democratic Party and its establishment. So yes, the troll farms factor zero in that. If you consider the ocean of divisiveness that's coming from the left and the right, what is called the left and the right, and the actual capitalist country we live in, then we're going to call the troll farms nothing. I'm going to call them a thimble. If you want to talk about the thimble when the whole ocean is out there, fine. If you want to tell me that there's actually a little dinghy out there when there is a whole sea of boats making things happen, then that's fine, Eduardo. But
you said zero.
Oh my God. Because those don't matter. They're having nothing. they have no factor in
I
what's...
have an issue with blanket statements.
I know, because you...
I have an issue with blanket statements, and so...
Because you don't want to acknowledge the actual thing that's,
I don't know
that's
if it's a
driving
thimble
this.
to a ship, right? Because I would say we don't know how much is going on that's brewing behind the scenes on the internet as well. And that's hard to measure. So I wouldn't even say it's a thimble. But just so that I'm telling you, just so that I tell you, I do not like blanket statements.
I know that.
I don't like things being just, so thrown out. Like there isn't a consideration for just a percentage of other elements as well. There are so many factors into play. We cannot just say it's 100% one thing. That's
what I
not
would say,
how
I
speak.
do think there is some element of that. It's not zero. I would say that, but it's definitely not significant. Because again,
okay, that could be
because not
debatable.
everyone
Yes,
is connected
that's
to the
fine.
internet the way
That's
we
fine.
are.
No, you're right, and
You
that's different from saying zero.
Okay, can we move on?
Yes, but this is what the episode's about.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
because here's why it matters.
Yeah.
Why it matters to say zero is because I actually want to change the world. Because you don't believe in revolution, dude. And hold on, and you believe that people and the reason the troll bots exist, they don't exist to explain people who exist in the center. The reason the troll bots are being talked about is they are made to explain the ideas on the fringe. And those ideas and that anger, not only does it not have anything to do with the troll bots, but the troll bots haven't even made them spit out any fire. The fire is being tapped down by Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. I know that there's a fire there because that's the fire that makes it possible for a revolution. And I guarantee you, Russian troll bots aren't interested in that. Or any troll bots.
I agree
and
with
not
you.
only not interested in that, they have no way of tapping into that. So they don't factor. They're zero. Because what we're talking about is people's desire for change. Now, unfortunately, that anger, the anger people feel about the system is being entirely confined within the electoral system between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. And the capitalists thank their lucky stars that it's like that. They're still complaining about it, but they're so glad it's contained within that. So the reason I say zero is because I feel confident that what we're seeing, actually, the anger we're seeing, is actually the same anger that makes it possible for a working class revolution to take place, where people can actually have an insurrection and take their government down by force of arms. So troll bots don't figure in that, dude.
It's only relevant, I think, to the degree that we are talking about it. In that it's the narrative that takes over.
And it's being talked about because the establishment is putting it in there to fool us into believing they're talking about why the left and the right are becoming polarized, and they have nothing to do with the polarization.
Well, like I said, if we're going to be, I think we're in agreement about this article. This article is singling out Russia, singling out their motives, and I am in agreement with you that the intelligence community of this country is in cahoots and have a political agenda in that area. I am in agreement with that. So I do believe that in cahoots with the mainstream media that this is they're propping up that propaganda.
Yeah.
So that's where I can say that I am in agreement with. I'm not going to deny that doesn't exist, though.
The troll farms, yes. All right, so let's see how far we get today. This has already taken us into a different... That's why I love this. This is a good episode.
I was thinking about piñatas.
All right, the next part
Continue.
reads this. Should I read the whole time, or is it somebody else
You
want to?
should.
I think you're the one
okay.
with the out.
All right.
Without.
Yeah. If you're continuing with us, we'll see if we make it through the whole article. But
soap opera will get better.
Yeah, we'll leave a link to the article if we don't get through the whole thing. But in this election, the broad strategy, as opposed to the specific tactics, is not exactly a mystery. Mr. Putin, the analysts agree, mostly seeks anything that will further take the sheen off American democracy and make presidential elections in the United States seem no more credible than his own. After that, he is eager for a compliant counterpart in the White House, one less likely to challenge his territorial and nuclear ambitions. Mr. Trump and Mr. Sanders disagree on almost everything, but both share an instinct that the United States is overcommitted abroad. Neither is very likely to pursue policies that push back aggressively on Mr. Putin's plan to restore Moscow's influence around the world, from the former Soviet states to the Middle East. If you're trying to sow chaos in a vitriolic election, Mr. Putin can hardly hope for better than a face-off between an incumbent with a history of race baiting, who is shouting America first at rallies while suggesting that the coming election is rigged, and a democratic socialist from Vermont advocating a drastic expansion of taxes and government programs like Medicare.
And he goes into American exceptionalism to me. American democracy. So basically saying that there is something to defend in terms of our democracy in the United States, and that it is under attack is furthering that narrative and putting a face to it. Mr. Putin. And at that part, the analysts agree. Again, giving legitimacy to the narratives of the state, and a state that has proven to not be trustworthy. For people who are listening, and I think a lot. And again, you mentioned that I think that is happened. That a lot of people are weary of the state, and that's one of the at least general ideas about the Democratic and Republican parties that I find very interesting, is that the Democrats, the liberals, the left, we should be talking about not a big government. We should be talking about, opposing the government. But yes, at the end of this, what you read, Bernie Sanders is talking about more taxes and more this and that. And so how are we supposed to trust a state that has proven to be, in cahoots with the people that are oppressing us? How are we supposed? So they tax the rich. So what? Are we gonna trust that they're gonna deliver? Are we gonna trust that the system that's already so corrupt, because capitalism does its thing, that they can deliver? So that's one of my problems with Sanders. That he keeps selling this lie that But again, and I do see it, as a, kind of what Obama did. Basically bringing the revolutionary energies to a dead end and suffocating those flames. But yeah, that's my thought on this part.
My thought on this one paragraph here shows to me that this is where this person is a puppet to the intelligence community.
Yeah.
Because here they clearly state what this is. I mean, this is so clear for them. The intelligence community, since the Cold War, with Clinton, with Bush, with Obama, has always had pursuits outside of the USA, have always found reasons to be on the war of terror or to meddle in proxy wars. And Trump, as many Democrats will not acknowledge because everything is anti-Trump, Trump has actually not wanted to be so much meddling in foreign in the foreign areas. Although he has, with Israel, right? He has, for example, supported Israel against the Palestinians, and he has still maintained the army, the military in the Middle East. But he did do this thing against Bolton, where he didn't go against North Korea, as well as he is not waging a war against Russia. And so Trump and Trump undermines the intelligence community a lot, and as of right now is firing people in the intelligence community because they're not doing what as he wishes. And mostly Trump performs under transactional reasons when he goes abroad. It's mostly about in his personal interest, not so much in the interest of the USA, I would think. And here, Sanders is being singled out as well, because Sanders has also said that we are not to be meddling in other countries' affairs, and as well as not super criticize Cuba and Fidel Castro, which is right now during this debate that was being had. So he wants to keep things in-house and he wants to focus on the things, but he's not interested in making enemies with everyone. So both Trump and Sanders are not really in alignment perfectly with the intelligence community. And the intelligence community is afraid of that because the intelligence community has had a long history with previous administrations working together to have more U.S. influence. So this is the reason why Donald Trump and Mr. Sanders are not really their preferable candidate for the intelligence community. So if anyone, this paragraph alone says it all. How this this writer is just a puppet, un títere for the intelligence community. It just clearly says it. I mean, it's right there. Neither is very likely to pursue policies that push back aggressively on Mr. Putin's plan. I mean, right there, it states it. They're not interested. So that's why I can see that they're really showing their true colors here.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I want to add a few things about first the real record right here of Trump has armed Ukraine. Trump has gotten out of nuclear proliferation treaties that mean that the United States is preparing to gear up its nuclear weapons, which means a nuclear arms race with Russia. Trump attacked Iran. All right, all of those things are indications that Trump is prepared, and I think he's been pushed into doing the kinds of things that deep states has wanted of him, which is to fight a more aggressive war with Russia, not as emphasize China. I actually don't agree that Trump is being transactional. I think there's a policy debate taking place here, but I really agree with you that is there. What I also want to point out is, one, he's lying about Trump's actual record on messing with Russia. Trump has been a standard U.S. imperialist. I'm going to go after Russia when I need to, if pushed by the state to do so. But secondly, it's laughable to me that if Putin would think that Medicare for all in the United States somehow destabilizes this country. Like, it's laughable. I mean, and what really is shown here is this person, he's writing to the ruling class in some ways, but he's trying to write to a liberal audience to frighten them into, the boogie of Trump and boogie of Sanders, and saying, oh, higher taxes and Medicare for all. These are policies, and trying to frighten you by saying that somehow those policies are ones that Putin is wringing his hands, hoping that the United States goes for higher taxes and goes for Medicare for all, because it will somehow destabilize the country.
Yeah,
it's like
and
ridiculous.
I think he's also right into that again, that liberal class, reminding them that we need to be the police of the world, the big hammer, because no one else is responsible enough to do it but us.
Mm-hmm. And I want to point out, he does say, Trump is saying that the election is rigged. Iowa was rigged. I mean, and we're going to get to that later, but it is rigged. And so when Trump says some of this stuff, he's only talking about the tip of the iceberg to the degree to which the election is rigged. And he's trying to say, that's crazy that our elections in the United States are rigged. It's not at all crazy. It happened in 2016. Yeah. It looks going to happen again in 2020. Had nothing to do with Russia. It has everything to do with the operations of how the U.S. state is operating. And the DNC plays a heavy role in it too. This is a quote from a woman. She goes, so this goes on, it goes, any figures that radicalize politics, this is a quote, any figures that radicalize politics and do harm to center views and unity in the United States are good for Putin's Russia, said Victoria Nuland, who in a long diplomatic career had served both Republican and Democratic administrations and had her phone calls intercepted and broadcast by Russian intelligence services. The intelligence reports provided to the House Intelligence Committee inciting Mr. Trump's ire may make the American understanding of Mr. Putin's plans sound more certain than they really are, according to intelligence officials who contributed to the assessment. Those officials caution that such reports are as much art as science, a mixture of informants, intercepted conversations, and intuition, as analysts in the nation's 17 intelligence agencies try to get into the heads of foreign leaders. Though intelligence officials have disputed that the officer who delivered the main briefing said Russia was actively aiding the president's re-election, people in the room said the intelligence officer's responses to lawmakers' follow-up questions made clear that Russia was trying to get Mr. Trump re-elected. There's a lot going on in this quote.
Yeah.
Let's see. I mean, I can start with one comment, or do you want me to?
Yeah, why don't you-
So I'm going to go with this.
We've already-
I'm going to go with this quote. I'm just going to talk about this woman's quote, Victoria Nuland. She goes, "Any figures that radicalize politics and do harm to center views and unity in the United States are good for Putin's Russia." So basically, I mean, this really does play the game that they equate radical views of any sort with something that only helps Russia, not with something that could possibly take the government down, could possibly bring the U.S. state down. I mean, I guess you could say that something that takes the U.S. state down helps Russia, but that, I mean, I don't think you could make a more succinct kind of way of assessing where the establishment is coming from. They associate centrist views with unity, and it's a unity of a neoliberal unity of the rich overall, and of the establishment basically running this world, and that's unity. That is the centrism, and that is the stability that they're talking about. And what they're saying is any of these views that go far right or far left, well, that's just Russia, you know, and it's just off. It's disgusting. But I want to say something that I found out about this Victoria Nuland. Let me see if I can find this. Oh, I got to do this.
Was she born in Russia?
No, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but she played a role. She was a person who was a central figure in taking down the Ukrainian government that was elected there during that time. So she helped pump in millions into the movement that took down the Ukrainian government. That's her. So she's the one who's claiming they're meddling with me, but she was a central figure in meddling in the Ukrainian elections to take down their person. So
It's a hypocrisy of it.
If I'm not mistaken, when Ukraine, the whole thing happened, there was also claims that the Russians were using the same outside influence
yes.
in Ukraine to radicalize people.
Right, which is why the U.S.
Yeah.
stepped in to blah blah. Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's where I first started to hear this talk of influencing governments through bots and stuff. And
Yes. And I don't know if you want to say anything about this stuff right here.
I think that is just briefing the intelligence committee, no? And
Well, what I read in it was already he's showing how little evidence there is when he says, the officials were kind of, well, they were caught, we don't really know. But when you ask me questions, then we said, and this is what's actually happened since that time, is more and more of these intelligence figures have emerged and said, we never said that was actually happening. But when questioned, well, we did then say it was happening. So and then the whole thing of that these reports are as much art as science.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get into the heads of foreign leaders. No, these are just people pushing an agenda and using any sort of, not even facts, but anything to basically make an assessment that fits their interests. As if these people don't have a history of lying and having their own interests themselves. So that's what I read in that part.
It sounds to me also that either party will take advantage of that narrative and pursue it to the degree that it brings people into the fold of, into going to the ballot box. But obviously, when it's about quote unquote consequences, it fizzles out. Just like the impeachment happened, this Russian investigation happened. Because if they really pursued, if there was people that pursued, pulled the strings, everyone's fucking guilty.
Yeah.
Everyone in the government is guilty. That's why when the impeachment happened or these investigations happened, I kind of figured they wouldn't end in nothing in the sense of people in jail or well, some people have
Roger Stone.
But in general, again, it goes back to this is meddling to me. This is these lies in bringing people to the ballot box because it matters. This is the most important election every time. Mm-hmm. So.
I think I have no comment for this one for now. I think because we have I want to.
Save
the article
your
will
fire.
continue.
Yeah. Here, this is one intelligence is hardly a perfect process, as Americans learned when the nation went to war in Iraq based in part on an estimate that Saddam Hussein was once again in search of a nuclear weapon.
Justifying.
Oh my God.
I mean, he feels like he has to at least say, well, we completely lied about...
But he's dancing around that. Wow.
So I just...
I mean, it's clear. No?
I'm going to start using that.
The weapons of mass destruction was one of the... I think we have names for every period of war. And that period of war, which lasted more than 18 years, has continued and still goes on. And we are still trying to justify it in this area.
And
And yeah, it was just that. I think it's just. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
And the intelligence assessment that said that the World Trade Center is coming down was Osama bin Laden who's hidden in a thing. We have to go take down Afghanistan. That's an intelligence assessment. The intelligence assessment that says Syria is being attacked with chemical weapons. We have to attack Barack Assad. You know, or the intelligence assessment that says Libya is doing something wrong. We have to go bomb Libya and destroy that country and create a civil war. I mean, every one of these people, whether you can also go back to the Gulf of Tonkin, the Vietnam War, all these different lies that are being told. These people have a perfect record of lying, because their job is to make sense for people who don't, U.S. people who don't want a war, make sense of the most war-making country in the world. They have to make sense of what this most war-making, belligerent capitalist class in the world, how does it do what it does? And they have to justify it with their lies.
If we're gonna call them experts, they need to be called expert manipulators.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. We'll see if we want to go. Ms. Stent noted on Saturday that if the Russians were in fact interfering in this election, quote, it could bring about new energy sanctions. She said that one piece of legislation in the Senate would require new sanctions if evidence of Russian meddling emerged from intelligence agencies. So far, Mr. Putin may have concluded that the penalties are small price to pay if he can bring his geopolitical rival down a few more notches, she added. And the early intelligence analysis suggested that by backing Mr. Sanders in the primary and Mr. Trump in the general election, Mr. Putin would probably have a good chance of maximizing the electoral tumult. Yeah.
I don't like sanctions myself, because it isn't the leadership that suffers from the sanctions. It's the working class. And so if they do want to impose sanctions, they will be imposing it on the working class. And I think this is just getting into the head of the Kremlin. I think they're trying to figure like what they would do. This is what they're thinking that the Kremlin would actually do, which is unknown. Early again, it's not that who knows if it is a political agenda, but they're trying to get into their head and trying to tell us and decipher it for us.
So yeah, this is a message to the Russians, not for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that sanctions are another instrument of war, another element of aggression, and even when they're being sold as regime change, humanitarian BS like we've seen in Iran and in Venezuela, they're not targeted for. I'm thinking that it's not targeted for regime change. Even it's just it's war, economic war to destabilize their economies and to hit the capitalists of that country, because they're at war constantly. Because but I agree. Ultimately the people that suffer the most are the most vulnerable. The bottom of the pyramid.
And the part that stuck out to me was actually the first sentence. If the Russians were in fact interfering in this election, this whole article and the stuff that has come out from the intelligence community, it made it seem like it was like, well, this is happening. They're trying to do this, and now she's already kind of revealed that there's no real evidence, like with this, if the Russians were in fact interfering in the election. So it just keeps going back and forth between, well, the intelligence community is saying it, but if there's actual evidence of it, so it's just a smoke and mirrors game.
And to me, like anytime I hear that argument about Russians, again, it's a bit condescending, to the people that are angry. It shows a dismissal of people's anger, and that they couldn't have possibly voted for Trump.
Right.
That they could have possibly done that in their right mind.
Which is happening right now with Sanders. Now people are going, it can't possibly go this way, and people are being very surprised by it.
I have a question when you say that, Kenny. Do you think that I do think that people voted for Trump, but he did not win the popular vote. So he didn't ultimately win. He won by the electoral vote.
I don't remember that.
So that's what was claimed, is that
it's not. I mean, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote.
I mean, I actually believe that our national election, this is me, 2016, I believe that the national election was attempted to be rigged so Clinton would win, but they weren't able to push it far enough. That's my belief.
Oh my, Andy.
Okay.
I never knew that about you, Andy, and this is now supporting a conspiracy claim from the YouTube closets.
So I believe
Oh no.
Clinton's votes were actually pushed up by the intervention of the establishment and the state into our elections, who actually meddled with our elections. They certainly did it in the Democratic primary, and they were completely shocked and stunned that even though they tried to flip votes for Clinton, they still lost.
If you remember that during that election, not only did the polls lie, but if you
The
go back,
polls are not direct votes.
No,
He
of
is
course
saying
not.
that direct
No.
votes,
But
that is
that's
what
about
I
Meddling.
bumped.
When we go to South America and we talk about election fraud, mostly what we do are use the disagreement between the polls and what actually takes place at the ballot box, particularly exit polls, and that's what was happening here.
But the
Not polls, exit polls.
yeah, all right.
and so
I'm just yeah.
and the other point that I wanted to highlight from that, again, the whole system trying to get behind Hillary Clinton because she was proven to be, part of the deep state and establishment. And remember all the newspapers that there were a bunch of newspapers that had never endorsed the Democratic, they all fell behind her, and yet she lost. And that's when people started saying that it must have been something else because people couldn't have possibly voted for this person, even though even in California we've elected actors like Schwarzenegger and in other places, because again people were angry, but we dismiss their anger as ignorant, manipulated minds because they're ignorant and backwards. That's what I read between these lines from the liberal. When the liberals push this narrative of the Russians, and also there was about, I think I read about 8 to 9 million people that flipped votes from Obama to Trump or to the Republicans, and there's people who openly say it because they're looking for something radical, and it doesn't make everyone a deep racist, but they're thinking about their circumstances.
And they saw Trump as a bigger threat to the establishment than Clinton.
I think this. I'm not going to comment on this because I think this should be a separate episode. I personally do not have enough information regarding what you claim and what I think you're backing what he is claiming. I do not think. Well, I cannot say I do not think because I haven't actually looked into it. I could see why. I could see why, in the sense like I could potentially contemplate and indulge in it a bit, but that doesn't mean I support it. So because I haven't looked into it, so I will reserve any comment on it because I have to look into it further.
All right,
It's like the 9/11 conspiracy.
Right.
You just had to read the experts' opinions.
Tower number 7, building 7. Robert O'Brien, the president's national security advisor, said in an interview with ABC to be broadcast on Sunday that he had not seen evidence that Russia sought to intervene in Mr. Trump's favor and that reports of Mr. Putin helping Mr. Sanders' campaign came as, quote, no surprise. Mr. Sanders, for his part on Friday, warned Moscow to stay out of the election.
Leave it there.
Yeah.
To me, the Sanders part, that to me says that he's not about the working class.
Yes.
That he's because he's perpetuating that narrative. Because one of my beefs again with Sanders is that last election he was robbed in broad daylight.
Yeah.
If he cared about the working class, if he cared about change in this country, if he was a socialist, if he understood socialism, at least again there are different opinions on socialism, he would have run and lost on purpose outside those two parties and talk shit about both. That would have been his legacy, and that would have been maybe capture a little bit of the vote, but maybe start something outside these two parties that just split us apart with our I don't want to. Our legs, are wide open. One has the left, one has the right, and we can walk. and then we wanna,
I hope you're envisioning a man by that.
Yeah.
And that's a woman. That's,
a man
that would be a bit
But I mean, I'm sorry.
misogynistic.
That's what I.
Right.
I'm just thinking, that
Yes.
that we're in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
Because we cannot move one or the other way. And I'm concerned. This is why I talk about that Sanders is not socialism. I will not get tired of doing that, because if he wins and fails, the right is going to rise and with a vengeance. And let's talk about who's going to suffer first when we don't have weapons to defend ourselves. When the state is going to be under the grip of a real fascism. So that's my fear. So he's not socialism. And he shows it with these quotes, and we talks about borders and humanizing, a lot of the systems that can be humanized under capitalism. Mm-hmm. He's a reformist. He's not a revolutionary socialist.
We had an episode on Russiagate, and I do think that by Sanders, I think it's a political move of his to try to deviate attention away from him, because I think that he doesn't want to be considered a fraud, his whole campaign. But so he has to single out Russia, because everyone else is pointing their fingers as to maybe that's what you're doing. You're having your allegiance, or you're working with them. But I do think that it perpetuates more of that.
So he's perpetuating a lie. How much better is he than the people that are pushing these narratives?
Right.
Yeah,
to me, he's a liar too. And if you want to win through lies, you're not my person.
Yeah, I agree that he is perpetuating.
Yeah. Imagine Mr. Sanders saying, "I'm not worried about Moscow. I'm worried about the DNC. I'm not worried about Moscow. I'm worried about Facebook. I'm worried about Jeffrey Bezos. I'm worried about Bloomberg. I'm worried about Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. Those are the people. They're controlling our entire election apparatus. Those are the ones I'm worried about. I'm not interested in fighting a war with Moscow like our Central Intelligence community is." But by saying this, not only does he obscure socialism, he empowers the Central Intelligence Agency, because he gives it its raison d'etre for existing, which is to go after Moscow and Russia.
And if he is serious about taking on the establishment, his favorite quote, he should be taking on these fuckers.
Yes.
He should be calling out their lies. So that's why I think he's a fraud.
Yeah. These are the moments where I think Sanders really sheds the light onto what he's really about. And people think, and you're not the first one, and I know you have your skepticism, but even people who are skeptical of Sanders, but maybe vote for him and things like that, they will say, "Oh, he's being civil. He's trying to play a game. He's doing this." That has nothing to do with it. He's exposing to us that that the establishment has nothing to fear from him, and that he's going to support the establishment. That's that's exposed in these kinds of quotes.
And to me, again, from learning, or at least the process I'm in, learning about how Hitler came to power, how things in Brazil have played out, in Nicaragua, is again the left that opens the door to the violence, the fascism, because we want to play this centrist BS that is not possible. It opens the doors to fascism. The left that wants to compromise in that sense, that wants to play with their rules, with their games, through their lies, through their structure, it needs to be dismantled.
Yes, let's continue.
Okay. The senator is hardly a new target for the Russians. The 2018 indictment of 12 Russian intelligence officers for their activities in the last presidential election, issued by the Justice Department under the Trump administration, claimed that the officers, quote, engaged in operations primarily intended to communicate derogatory information about Hillary Clinton, to denigrate other candidates such as Ted Cruz and Mark Rubio, and to support Bernie Sanders and then candidate Donald Trump. Robert S. Mueller, in the report on his investigation into Russian operations, concluded that the release of memos hacked from the Democratic National Committee were meant to inflame Mr. Sanders supporters by revealing that the committee was funneling assets to Miss Clinton. I think that's, yeah.
Well, anyone else want to?
You could, or I could.
No, please.
All right, the first thing, I'll just say two things. One is, Robert Mueller's testimony and Robert Mueller's report has already been discredited, and they're bringing it out again with the 12 these 12 Russian intelligence officers that they just made up some names, and they never were going to get these guys, and it was just part of this whole fabric. It was part of the myth of the Mueller investigation that was Russiagate out of 2016, which has been completely discredited. That's number one. Number two is, look at these names of the people who Russia was going after. Ted Cruz, Mark Rubio, Hillary Clinton. Who are these people? This is 2016 establishment people. And they're saying Russia was after them. No, this is the establishment kind of regurgitating up its revenge on these folks. And the last thing is, the biggest supporter of Donald Trump in the Republican primary was the mainstream media and Hillary Clinton. That was their strategy. Yeah. Their strategy for winning the election was to get the mainstream media that they had cooked hooks into to give Donald Trump tons of airtime during the primaries because they thought they could beat him. So Russia didn't intervene in that shit. That wasn't Russian bots. That was the Democratic National Committee under Hillary Clinton with their guidance saying, give the guy airtime. We'll go after him. We'll come after him after he wins the primary.
Because he was a clown, a joke, probably,
yes.
That he couldn't possibly win and people wouldn't take him serious.
And so Hillary Clinton was a far bigger supporter of Trump than Putin ever could be, and did way more to actually direct the mainstream media to give Trump airtime, because people talked about the billions of free airtime he got. That was directed, and that came out of these DNC emails, from WikiLeaks, that they directed them to do that.
And Trump thrived on that too. I mean, he knows how to play, the media, obviously. And but yeah, he got so much free airtime. He didn't have to spend the whatever millions Bloomberg is spending right now.
But the idea that Putin was responsible for that, when the actual people responsible for it are the Democratic Party, is like laughable.
There was, I think what comes up for me in the last paragraph was Julian Assange.
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that? I was going to look it up very quickly.
Well, I mean, basically Julian Assange is right now, he's in solitary confinement trying to be extradited by the United States for essentially putting out the U.S.'s dirty laundry, for exposing criminality in the U.S. Like he's exposed criminality in the Iraq War and other things in the CIA for some dirty tricks that the CIA does. I can't remember what it was called. It's like District 7 or something like that. And so there, that last paragraph right here about the memos hacked from the DNC, what the claim is that Russia hacked those and gave them over to WikiLeaks, which Assange, he denies that claim. He says, I'm not going to tell you who it came from. There's the idea that some of it came from this dude who was murdered, Seth Rich and stuff like that. But I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, he has denied to say whether it was a Russian link or not. And so I was looking I wanted to see, but I'm just he was offered by Donald Trump a pardon if he would say Russia was not involved in leaking Democratic Party emails. That was stated in the Court of London. So here, I think that was what for me came up for this. I do think that that by saying that they were being hacked is in this Mueller report is more of that perpetuating that narrative about how the Russians are helping out the Sanders campaign, and that's because Mueller has also been part of the intelligence community. So of course he would make that connection and state it in his report. And so I would see it as there is some political bias in there, a political motivation in there, that he would put it in there to say that the Sanders campaign is actually benefiting, or they're trying to inflame Mr. Sanders' supporters by revealing the committee was funneling assets to Mrs. Clinton.
But also that in the 2016 election, those emails revealed how much meddling and illegal intervention was done on the part of the establishment Democratic Party was
DNC,
done.
I agree.
And this is an attempt to obscure that,
yes,
while basically bringing up, oh, here comes Putin. Putin's trying to do this. Putin, again, it's inverting the pyramid. That all of the damage to this capitalist electoral system is being done actually by the mainstream players in this country, and it ain't being done by Vladimir Putin way out there.
Yeah, no, I completely in agreement about that, because that's, and like you said earlier, and Sanders should be calling out Facebook, the DNC, the establishment, and possibly even start saying what Trump says, the deep state.
Right. Yeah. And there was another quote here. We'll see if we get to about Facebook, but the more recent public reports emerging from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and classified reports generated by the CIA and others suggest that while Russian objectives have remained the same, the techniques have shifted. Quote, the Russians aren't going to use the old playbook. We know that, says Christopher C. Krebs, who runs the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. His organization, along with the National Security Agency, NSA, and British intelligence have been steadily documenting how Russian operatives are becoming stealthier, learning from the mistakes they made in 2016, as they focus on evading more vigilant government agencies and technology companies trying to identify and counter malicious online activity. The Russians are boring into Iranian cyber offense units, apparently so they can initiate attacks that look as if they originate in Iran, which itself has shown interest in messing with American electoral process. Russians are putting more of their attack operations on computer servers in the United States, where the National Security Agency and other intelligence agencies, but not the FBI and Homeland Security, are prohibited from operating.
Wait, hold on. Let me see.
Yeah, okay.
Within the Security Agency.
I forgot to throw in North Korea and Venezuela.
National Security Agency. Why would they be prohibited from operating?
That was, you mean the NSA?
Yeah.
The NSA isn't prohibited. Like, that was what it was.
Because they infiltrate.
They infiltrate all
everywhere.
Yes, illegally.
And if they are interested in supposedly putting a hindrance to this meddling, and there are supposedly some of these operations of computer servers here in the USA, wouldn't it be easier to infiltrate them here than it would be easier to infiltrate them abroad?
He's trying to make the claim that legally the NSA and intelligence agencies can't be intervening in our computers, they can't be getting into our phones, but the FBI and Homeland Security are able to because that's their job. He's trying to perpetuate the myth that the NSA ain't deep into all our stuff. That was one of the funny things I saw. When he's like, are you kidding me? Like, oh, well, you know, the NSA, they're not on your phones. They're not collecting metadata.
And also perpetuating the idea that the FBI and the Homeland Security apparatus have our best interests.
Right.
So I feel this is saying we know, but we don't know, because we were able to do it, but we're not able to do it now because they've become stealthier, because they're now on home territory. But it's very difficult on home territory.
Right. Well, the other thing that was interesting is because he said, learning from the mistakes they made in 2016. I mean, if you took at face value that, let's say, Putin did want to actually run the U.S. elections and Trump is a puppet, 2016 was a smashing success for Russia. One, they didn't get caught. Two, they got Trump in power. So they had nothing to learn from it. They're going to go from strength to strength now. There was no mistakes that Russia made, if you take this at face value, because they got their dude, and they couldn't even produce evidence that Russia did it. Again, I mean, it's just more sneaky stuff. And I love how he throws Iran in here, though.
I know, I was going to say, and using Iran as a justification why we here in the USA should go after Iran.
Exactly.
Because they're saying Russia is using Iran to create these cyber wars, and that's why we need to go to Iran.
And Iran itself has shown an interest in messing with American electoral process.
And they've used this narrative too on North Korea, actually. Them doing claims that they also have the interest in meddling with our computer systems. They have like military training soldiers, in cyber attack.
Yeah.
And in one of the more effective twists, they are feeding disinformation to unsuspecting Americans on Facebook and other social media by seeding conspiracy theories and baseless claims on the platforms. Russians hope everyday Americans will retransmit these falsehoods from their own accounts. That is an attempt to elude Facebook's efforts to remove disinformation, which it can do more easily when it flags inauthentic activity like Russians posing as Americans. It is much harder to ban the words of real Americans who may be parroting a Russian storyline, even unintentionally. Mr. Krebs said this was why the Department of Homeland Security had to focus on educating Americans about where their information was coming from. He asked last year, how do you explain this is how you're being manipulated? Wait, how do you explain this is how you're being manipulated? This is how they're hacking your brain.
So they want to tell us how we're being lied to? I mean,
It reminds me of like an episode from Black Mirror.
yeah.
This part here.
No,
you know,
it's true.
the propagandist is saying we're not
Yeah,
exactly.
we're not brainwashing you. They are, and let me show you how they are. You know, it's
And-
very Orwellian.
And anything that falls outside our story is a conspiracy theory.
Yes. Yep. And just to put a face to this, I told Brandy this. She didn't actually know this. But do you know that when there were people putting out that the Iowa caucus was rigged after that election, that Facebook was flagging that as fake news and not letting them put it up on Facebook? And that Facebook and Zuckerberg actually supports Buttigieg?
Yes.
He was a supporter, and he had actually told Buttigieg, here are some people you should put on your campaign and blah, blah, blah. So, like, these are the people intervening in the elections. Zuckerberg, Facebook, CIA, DNC, New York Times, they have got their hands deep attempting our brains. The only thing I can say is it actually isn't working that well. You know, like the degree to which Trump is continuing to advance, at least have that popularity among a population, and Bernie Sanders, as much as these people do not represent liberation of any sort, whether it be on the right or the left, I don't actually think this crap is having that much of an effect on it's not working on people's heads on the edges, like the populist anger that's driving those things. It works with liberals. They go nuts. But it's not working with people who actually really have thoughts in their brains.
So what is polarizing the country? You know, what is creating that wedge, would you say? Or has created?
I mean, it is actually it's student debt. It's healthcare. It's poverty. It's gentrification.
It's the wealth gap.
Yeah. I mean, it is immigrants being hunted in this country. You know, and I understand there's racism and some people, we got to go get, but there's a whole set of people who aren't just immigrants, but who know those immigrants, and they're like, are we living in a country like a gulag state where people get hunted down and thrown on the other side of the border? They might not believe in open borders, but they know something's deeply wrong with this kind of crap going on. And of course, the burgeoning prison system, the fact that schools aren't funded, and the fact that so much wealth is getting people hear these stories about Jeffrey Bezos and rich this guy and rich that guy, and Blomberg buying the election. And I think people are just fed up with it. And they think something desperate has to happen. And so they hear Bernie, and they see the fear in the establishment as they hear about Trump and Bernie Sanders, and I think it drives them to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because Sanders calls out the enemy, right? And other candidates talk about such as the minimum wage or specific things around policy, but they don't talk about behind the curtains of those things, which Bernie does.
Right.
He says the drug prices have gone up because it benefits who?
The drug companies.
Right, so he targets that. Whereas if you watch Pete Buttigieg, I was watching, his language is centered about what you need to do around here and not who are the billionaires funding this.
He doesn't want to expose his donors.
Right. So that's where I think that's why people like that, because it really finally pointing out in plain sight for others that this is that we're being hijacked by the wealthy class. We're being used or exploited by the wealthy class.
what I would say then, I'm answering my own question, just thinking, processing here, that, you know, then that demonstrates the level of desperation people have for something radical. something, you know, outside of what we already know. And you know, because this is something that I talked about with people, you know, Trump is an insurrection. You know, not the insurrection liberals want, but he was an insurrection, kind of like what Obama represented, an insurrection, you know, on the left. And a lot of people, you know, that voted for Obama turned to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, you know, that's how the split happens, because people are desperate for radical change, and then obviously these messianic figures come into play. And it's hard, and I can only speak about liberals in San Francisco, my community obviously, but it's hard for people to conceptualize a world without a democratic Republican binary. It's incredible, because, you know, when people ask me like, who are you gonna vote, I'm like, not Democrat, a Republican, hell no. Right. And then it's like, what are you then? Like,
exactly.
Okay, and then we can have a conversation. But it's again hard for people to conceptualize this, because we're being indoctrinated into this system, you know, yeah. So
I'm not sure there's much more beyond this. I mean, just see, and then we can decide if we want to say anything.
Yes, please.
Okay. In 2018, the United States Cyber Command and National Security Agency mounted a new and more public campaign to push back at the Russians, attacking and blocking their internet research agency for a few days around the November elections, and texting warnings to Russian intelligence officers that they were being watched. The NSA is preparing for similar counterattacks this year. On Thursday, the United States cited intelligence and blamed Russia for a cyber attack last fall on the Republic of Georgia, another place where Mr. Putin seems to be holding dress rehearsals. Now intelligence agencies face a new question. How do they run such operations and warn Congress and Americans at a moment when the president is declaring that intelligence on Russian election meddling is another misinformation campaign that is launched by Democrats in Congress?
This to me makes me immediately think of missile defense systems, that they're not for defense, they're for offense. You know, because especially cybersecurity is, you know, it's very, you know, I don't know a lot about, you know, but I know it's hard to defend attacks. So the best defense in anywhere is to be the biggest aggressor, the biggest bully. Mm-hmm. And so if maybe there is an aggressor, and if there is such a thing as manipulating people, I guess who's gonna have the biggest hammer? And we actually have a lot of the companies here, capitalist, you know, institutions that are playing that game, and they've shown that, you know, they're in cahoots with the deep state, Amazon, Facebook, you know, and I mean those are the big players, and they gobble up everyone else, you know, and so can't trust them either.
In this paragraph, I see justification for censorship.
Yeah.
For what we look at China doing in Weibo and WeChat and all of those other platforms, how they censor, even now with the coronavirus, how they are erasing for public safety, under the name of public safety. And then we have, I look at French media, and there is one about how they have a whole investigative report on how they are deleting posts from people who are trying to give us insiders look into Wuhan and the Wuhan, and to give us an insider's look on how there are actually corpses on the ground on the streets because people are dying and they're not getting the resources they might need. And I think this is what we fear could happen here, and this is a justification for it. We criticize China so much, but here I can see they're mounting a new and more public campaign, meaning, look, we're going to talk to the public now to encourage you all that this is why we're doing this.
Correct.
Justifying, to push back against the Russian attack, right? And blocking their internet, right? But really blocking whose internet? They're saying blocking their internet, but
Right.
whose internet will it be blocking? We're blocking ours. So I see there's going to be a lot of more tentacles of the intelligence community into infiltration into our systems
Yep.
and to our personal lives. And this is going to say, well, we're doing it for the benefit of a cleaner election and a more cleaner democracy under the name of democracy. And that's what I see, excuse me, from this paragraph.
It makes me think of like a, if trying to be fancy here, a quasi or Orwellian
Yeah.
world where, you know, someone decides the truth and who is outside, who's an enemy of the state.
Yep.
And you know, just sort of an anecdotal experience, I've been blocked from Facebook because I've used certain words, you know, about military, war, empire, and they blocked me. And so I kind of stopped using Facebook for that, because I mean, there is
Or
no
you
room
were
for
forced
that.
not to
Yeah,
use
exactly,
it.
exactly. You're right. You know, and so again, they have the power to decide truth. And
I mean, I can't say much more. I really agree with what you said, Eduardo, about that's what I read here is the justification for future and more aggressive intervention into our own internet. Because clearly, you can't use a few days in a November election. That's not going to have any effect on the things that they're accusing the Russians of doing. So this is just a statement of, it's a dress rehearsal for the United States intervention into our internet, the world's internet, and it's like you said, it's the Black Mirror.
Is there more?
That's it.
That's it. Thank you.
I do want to say,
this is a good article.
yeah, and one mistake we made, and this was kind of put together, and I think if we do things like this, I'll need to send these guys, this is the first time they're reading this
Yeah.
article, right? And that's a little bit...
Yeah.
So in the future, I think we really got to make sure that we all get a chance to read the article so we can respond with whatever's happening.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that's one critique I would make of this, you know. So we will do something like this in the future, maybe with articles that are like, but everyone needs a chance to read it beforehand.
Yes. Yeah. I thought you were going to use this as a reference for.
That's what I thought at first, but then the
Yeah.
more I looked at it, I was like, this just seems like a respond to thing because
Yeah.
there was so much in it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we didn't even get into ALEC. Have you heard of ALEC? It's the American Legislative Executive Council. So a lot of corporations give money to them to change legislation, influence legislation that has a direct impact into you know, our lives. So that's another nefarious.
And APAC.
Yeah, APAC. Yeah, the Israeli. We
But
never.
they came out and said, well, we're not going to give, like when Sanders said something, he said something in relationship to Israel and,
Yeah.
you know, something critical. And he's like, well, we're not going to give, we're going to come in here. And so Israel clearly is planning on intervening directly in the election.
I mean, and Netanyahu in 2015 bypassed any invitation and went directly to Congress to support, you know, the narrative of the Republicans, you know. So again, that's talk about foreign, you know, meddling in the elections. You know, Russia's, you know, I don't know. But yeah, that's my last thought.
Well, I appreciated this,
Yeah.
and I'm glad we got a chance
too.
to this. I have a suggestion for. Oh, well, you're going to try to connect us with some folks.
I'm trying to get us that interview. They do a lot of work so it's hard to pin him down. But we'll
And I
figure out
think
time.
since it's a weekend that we'd have to do it on,
Yeah.
I think we just have to pick the right weekend where we're
Right.
going to do an episode and then be of the week. Like we're going to have to and use that as a launching pad for the next.
and
episode.
we'll use it wisely
Wisely. We'll try to have it stored away because we can save
to
ourselves.
see how many times we could have used the other interviews. now.
No, I don't think see that, but
You don't.
I
see
do
it?
see that. He's right. Okay, I'm wrong. He's right.
Well, you see, unforeseen circumstances
Correct.
happened, and we could have
Somebody could go
placed
into a
them-
hospital because of infection, and we could have used those episodes.
I
But
feel like I'm in between like this married couple, just having I don't know what's going on.
I mean,
who's gonna get the kid?
Something that happened 20 days ago.
It could,
I want custody of Kenny if we break up.
Do you see how it could have been used? Then?
Yes, I do.
I want to use it already. Spend and splurge.
Anyway,
Money insulation.
Do you have an idea? Do you have an idea for next week, maybe?
I am going through something right now in my nephew's school where there are some issues in school, and I don't think that my nephew, I don't think he needs special education services / IEP, because I think it's an easy quick fix, and I have history with that with a kid that I had raised, and so I anyhow what I'm trying to get at is the question that I would leave you both to contemplate on. Do you both want to just ruminate around, are students of color being pushed into special ed / IEP
I
services
think it's worth talking about.
disproportionately? There are numerous articles out there and studies, and if they are, why is that? And what could we do alternatively?
Ooh, I might know someone. He's a counselor in San Mateo, I think, and he has had these issues. But
Well, it comes up in
We'll see.
education, so I think it's a worth thing.
And I have worked in special education, and I have been on both sides of the aisle. I have been a professional as an employee of the school district, as an instrument of the school district, and as well as I have been a student. I have raised a student, and now I'm involved in my nephew's life. And the first thing that I'm being told about some of the things that are happening are maybe he needs some services. And I'm very skeptical when people push it on black and brown children and English language learners, labeling blankets, just labeling children, assuming they have intellectual impairments when we're not looking at other factors. So,
I think that'd be an interesting subject to just bounce around.
okay.
And see where it
If you
leads.
all are interested, that's what
I am.
now is happening with me.
And there's stuff that actually is starting to brew in some of our work within our union. But I think you can wait probably another week. But I think in the next few weeks, I'm going to need to give an update on what's going on with our work in UESF.
All right.
We'll see. Because I think we might be getting somewhere.
All right. Oh, this concludes this episode for today. It is a long episode.
Yes.
Hopefully, if you've gotten to this far, you will have maybe fast forward a little bit. Our beginning friction.
No, stay there. Go back. See it again.
Well, anyhow, I hope that we'll be able to post this article so that you can read it yourself, and maybe you can comment on the section below and give us your own opinion about this article itself. Please check us out on any of our 5 platforms, on Bitchute, Google Play, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, or YouTube. Subscribe, rate, review, and best of all, share with your family and community. Check us out next week.
All right. See ya.
Ciao. Let me just think about one more thing I was going to say. I won't introduce it. It's fine. I was planning to introduce a new podcast I'm being a part of. Remember?
You can't do that on this podcast. There's no, unless we are getting some sort of money from you for advertising.
At the end, you can always.
No, I refuse. I can't. You gotta pay some money. Anybody want advertising on this space? $10.
Then where am I getting paid for to do this then?
Oh, that money goes to me. Doesn't it?
You're still living in a capitalist society, that's what check, so
Jesus.
get with it. We'll get going.
Here we go.
All right.
Hey, we can go to a Bernie thing event afterwards if you want. If you want more comedy.
Here we go.
Come